Good morning, Jeff. There's Jeff up there. And anyway, there's Trey. He's showing his good morning. It's good to see your face. Good to see you. All righty. So we have been doing the steps, and we work the
Recording in progress.
we work the steps in each addiction or problem that we have. It will work. The steps will work with any problem. I don't care what the problem is. And I grew up with parents that, bless their hearts, they did not know how to take a problem to a resolution. They just didn't. Their parents didn't know how to teach them. They didn't pass it on to us. And so, I didn't know how to solve a problem. You either got sick or you got crazy or something. But anyway, when I got to a 12-step program in Al-Anon in 1968, I latched on to the steps because it is a planned program of action that will take you from the problem to the solution, to a resolution on any problem you might have. So we have been going through the steps, and step one is what is the problem? And if you don't know what the problem is, you'll never find a solution. So that's why there's time. You spend time on step one saying what is the problem. And so in the basics, the whole meaning of step one is I am powerless. I'm powerless over. What are you powerless over? And so, it's that powerlessness, that feeling of powerlessness that wants us to find a solution. Without the powerlessness, we would think, oh, well, I can handle this, we can do it ourselves, So it's that feeling of powerlessness that we have no power left to our own devices. And so that's what step one is figuring out what the problem is. And that's why we encourage people to, to write about the first step, write about the problem. And so once you figure out you have a problem, and it is being powerless over whatever the problem is, whether it's alcohol, drugs, eating disorders, addiction, or, it could, any problem. It'll work for any problem. But it was designed by alcoholics in Alcoholics Anonymous. So, and it's really right out of the New Testament. There's nothing new under the sun. It is, in James and Ephesians of the Bible, it teaches us how to live life on life's terms. And that's where it came from. So, step two then, if we have a problem and we're powerless over it, we must find a solution. So the solution is finding a power greater than ourselves. And this is what really starts separating the people who really want to get into recovery and those who really don't. Because finding a solution, what we believe, is finding a power greater than ourselves. It's not a religious program, it's a spiritual program. And it's about finding, that, like I said, that power greater than ourselves. Most of us choose to call that power God. Some people getting into AA have had religious abuse. They don't want to hear anything about God. So we say higher power, whatever works for you at that time. Because if people will stay around the program, they will find the God of their understanding. In fact, that's what the steps are for. You do the first 11 steps. What's going to do, or really the first 9 steps, and what it's going to do is to begin to walk you up face to face with the God of your understanding. By step 12, if you haven't found a God of your understanding, you might want to go back to step 1. Because that's what the whole process is walking you up face to face with the God of your understanding. So that's 1 and 2. And so number 3, I mean, this is a simple program for complicated people. Step number 3 is you just make a decision. You divide your information. You see how great the problem is. If it is giving you so many problems that it interferes with your, every being, and then the solution is spiritual, you have a choice. Do I want to stay in the problem, or do I want to go toward the solution? That's what step 3 is. And then step 4, this is kind of what separates the adults from the kids, or the men from the girls from the women, or the boys from the men, because step 4 is, guess what? We get to take an inventory. And Bill W. was so smart, and like I said, I think it was godly, those 12 steps were godly inspired, that he gave us a planned program of action that is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous of how to do an inventory. And guess what? We get to write down all of our resentments, that we have a resentment toward other people. So we get to do their inventory first. We get to write down all those resentments of what those people did to us. Bless our hearts. My first one, I had over 80 people on that list that had done me wrong. Now, had I known that, what we'd be doing later on in the program, I might have shortened it. But anyway, in doing an inventory, we just look at, this is the first of the year. There's businesses everywhere are going to be taking inventories of the stock in trade, what sold good during the holidays, what didn't. They'll put it on sale. Anyway, an inventory is just to look at what you have. And that's what the 4th step is to look at at the stock in trade. What do we have in our life that's working and what's not working? So we get to look at our resentments, we get to look at the fears that we have, and then we get to look at problems in the sex area. And, when people hear problems in the sex area, well, a lot of people don't want to talk about that. And we must talk about it because we're all human. That is a God-given, it's God gave it to us. It's an ultimate expression of love, but it's misused so much, and so you look at those, you put out those list of, problems in the sex area, and then, and they break it down even more. Is it in the secret part? Was it a secret? Was it unknown? So you get to look at who you have harmed. A lot of times in the sex area, we make it all up in our mind. We're the ones who've harmed ourselves. And times that other people harm us. So you have to really do a good inventory, a self-inventory. And then what you do, when you do an inventory, you write down all of those resentments. There's Miss Sarah. How's married life? Good to see you. Maybe that's the wrong Sarah. Yes, different Sarah. Okay, but we're glad to have you. All right, so then in step 5, what you do, in step 4, you do the inventory, and then step 5, you share it with someone else, someone in the program, a sponsor. Back then, they didn't have sponsors. They just shared it with each other. And, later on, they called them sponsors. Or you can, take your 4th step to a spiritual leader or, spiritual guide. But it's mainly give that, do your 5th step with an understanding person, someone that will not judge you, that will have a listening for you. That's what step 4 and 5 is. You mark down, you put down everything that is, that is got in your way, the sunlight of God's Spirit. That's what an inventory is to do a self-inventory. And then 5th step, you share it with someone else, some understanding person that will not judge you. And that's why it's good to get someone that has the same disease that you have, because if you don't, maybe if you try to take and it's okay if they have an understanding of each addiction. But let's say you have an eating disorder and you're going to do a fifth step with a good alcoholic in the program and good standing. And, maybe they were a down and out, really severe alcoholic. Well, when they hear a fourth step or a fifth step from someone that's an overeater, they might discount what you are saying out of lack of understanding. So be careful of who you choose to hear your fifth step, someone that understands the addiction or the problem that you're looking at. And then out of that fifth step, you're going to see what your character defects are, because they're going to be glaring. They're going to be just kind of hit you in the face. And if you have a good sponsor, they will help you see what those character defects are. The character defects are resentment, self-pity, fear, overdeveloped pride, and problems in the sex area. Those are the character defects. It's going to come out in step 5. And so in step 6, 6 and 7, we call them little bang steps. They pretty much work together, because in step 6, you look at what your character defects are. And if you could have stopped acting out of those character defects yourself, you already would have. Because most addicts really want to live a better life. And we have tried, usually while using the substance. But nevertheless, you're doing the steps while you're clean and sober, regardless of what the addiction is. Whether it's a substance addiction, nicotine, alcohol, drugs of any sort, food problems, those are the substance. Or it's a process addiction, love and sex addiction, workaholism, the list goes on. So you look at those character defects, and if you have a good listener or a good sponsor that's going to listen to that fifth step, they're going to help you see what your character defects are. You may not like it, but they're going to help you see from what they have heard. And then that's all 6 is looking at what your character defects character defects are. And then 7, it says we go home after the fifth step and we take this book off of the shelf and we read about step 6 and 7. And we read about getting on our knees and asking God, and there is a 7th step prayer to ask God to remove these character defects. And I wanted God to zap me well. I wanted to get on my knees and say, okay, God, this is everything I did. This is how bad, awful, and wrong I've been. Zap me well. And, he has the power to do that, but that's not how he operates in most of our lives. What he does, he helps us to be aware of what our character defects are. And then we get up off of our knees and off of our rear end, and we get to work. And we begin to not live out those character defects. We're aware of what the character defects are, and we ask God to remove them. And when we're aware of them, to the best of our ability, we quit acting out of those character defects. Now, we're not going to do it perfect, we're not, because we're human beings. There's my friend right there, Jimmy Lumpkin. Good to see you. And I heard that. I hope you're feeling better. He's had some medical problems. So step 7 is we ask God to remove those character defects. And like I said, he's powerful enough, he could just zap us well. But and I have actually seen that happen. particularly when I was in the drug alcohol addiction field and worked strictly with drug addicts, alcoholics, and worked with some real low down, horrendously sick drug addicts and alcoholics. And I had the privilege of seeing one man in particular, and more than there's about three, but one in particular. He was a hardened criminal. He was there out of parole, out of the prison here in Texas, and we got the worst of the worst. And he had interrupted the entire system. He would cuss me out. He would threaten to hit me and all. And I told him when I left that night, I said, I'm leaving here. And if there's not a change in the morning, I'm calling your parole officer. And I meant it. And so I told the house manager, I said, if he acts out during the night, you call me. So I got to work the next morning, and the house manager, the night manager, usually was gone by the time I got there, but he waited for me. And he said, I want to tell you, I saw a miracle last night. And I said, well, what happened? And he gave me the man's name, and he said he went upstairs. And about 4 hours later, he came down a different person. And the story is, when I got to him and he was crying, and he'd had a spiritual experience. He had laid down in the bed, and there was a church across the alley, a big church, and the bells on the church started chiming. I think it was midnight or so, I can't remember the time, that he heard those bells. And he got out. He'd broken out. He'd left the center before, but he found a way to get out of his bedroom, went down the fire escape, went over to that church, and got down on his knees in front of that church. It's a huge First Baptist church. And he had a complete psychic change that was brought about by a spiritual experience. He had a meeting with God that lasted till the day that man died, and he was changed. He was a complete changed man. And he stayed with us for a year. We got him jobs. He learned a trade. And then he went back to school and became a drug alcohol counselor and worked at the Veterans Administration in Big Springs, Texas, until he died, and he did not die of addiction. So that's why I stay in this field, because of the miracles. But that is what a spiritual experience is, and that's what looking at your character defects, and only God can remove them. We can. So number 8 and 9 is what we're focusing on today. 8 is the simplest step to work in all of the 12. It's one line in the big book. It's one sentence. What we do is we make a list of the people that we've harmed. Now, I wish they told me that when I wrote out that 80-something resentments, because you pull out that 4th step, and right there is your amends list. You go over that amends list with your sponsor, and that becomes your amends list. Anywhere you have a resentment, there in your adult life, there's a part that you have played in that. Now, maybe they've done much more harm to you than you've done to them. It does not matter. You're cleaning up your side of the street, not theirs. And it's not about judging them for what they did to you. It's looking at what your character defects, your list of resentments, and the part that you played in that. So I had a very wise sponsor. I'm self-centered enough to think that God just plucked her out of Arizona and put her in West Texas. But anyway, she was a long-term Al-Anon person. And she came to our group. I was very new. It was in October of '68. And I was so shy, I could not say my name. I could not utter a sound. I couldn't do anything but cry for them. But anyway, in a couple of months, she came up to me and she said, "Do you have a sponsor?" And I said, "No, I don't." She said, "Well, now you do." And so she took me through the steps the first time. And I thank God for Alice every single solitary day, because she took me through those steps in a way that she taught me then how to sponsor people. And so when we came to step 8, it is so simple. She said, now you take that resentment, and Al-Anon's used the big book. We went through a period of time in Al-Anon, and I can't believe it, but it was in the, I think, late 70s. Al-Anon had this grandiose idea that AA material was not good for Al-Anons, and we went through a period of time we couldn't use the big book. Well, I was just, stubborn enough that I kept using it but anyway, so she took me through the steps right out of the book, out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And by the way, both of our husbands were still drinking, both of them. Her husband never sobered up. He died of alcoholism, but it didn't keep her from recovery. And my husband, by the grace of God and Al-Anon, God getting me out of the way, he found sobriety and had 32 years of sobriety when he passed away. And anyway, so she had me to do one simple thing, and doing step 8, she said, do 3 columns. And one column headed out, when you think of that list of people that you have harmed, if you saw them right now, would you be willing to make amends to them? So you write now on the top of one column. This is so simple, now. And then you list the people off of your list of resentments that you would be willing to make amends to right that minute if you were to see them. Write their names down. The third column is, oh no, I'm not ready to make amends to those folks. I'm willing to make amends, but not now. So that's on the second column. That's the future column. So you write those down. Morning, Bradley, good to see you. So you write those that you're not quite ready right now, but you're willing to. That's all you have to do in step 8 and 9 is be willing to make amends. So you make that list of people in the future. I'm going to hold that as a possibility. Now that last column is never. You never want to make amends to those people, ever. You don't want to see them. You're scared of them. You've done so much to harm their lives. You never want to go and face them again. And maybe they've done more harm to you, but you don't want to open that Pandora's box. You just never, ever want to make amends to them. So that's what I did. I made my list. Now, in the future, and then I never want to go there. You know what that heifer did? She made me, the first amends was off of that never list. Had I knew the way she was operating, I wouldn't have done that list like that. The sponsors are tricky like that. And so she had me do one of the hardest ones first. And so every name on your list, when you come out with that list, that, like I said, that's the easiest part, is when you come out with those lists of people that you have harmed. Then you go to step 9. Now, you do not work that list without a sponsor. You do those, and the step says to make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except to do so would injure them or others. That wherever was put there for a purpose. And I get, I'm pretty particular about these steps. I don't like any word changed in them. And people will, and I don't know if they do it intentionally or if it's just a slip, but they'll change wherever to whenever. Will you put a whenever in that with a new addict of any sort? That's for the future. Oh, well, whenever. I mean, one of these days I'll do that. One of these days, whenever, I'll do that. and they never get around to doing it. Wherever is different. Wherever puts the responsibility on us. Wherever. And so we get willing to make it our job to go one at a time and make amends. And our sponsor, a good sponsor, will teach us how to do that. And we have to get our grandiosity out of it, our one-upness. We don't go in there and, we go in with a little humility or a lot of humility. And I had some people on my list that I did not want to make amends to. And, it was things like gossip, in the church, gossip, backbiting, and I got a lot out of that because I would create me an audience, and then they would come back to me and they would want to know more, and I'd have to add to this, and whatever organization I was in, I would pretty much be the backbone of the gossipers of people, So I had a lot of people on my list, and I remember the first one was really hard because she had the same disease that I had, and it's compulsive overeating. And by that time, it was the first time that I lost 100 pounds. I'd lost a lot of weight. She was still almost at about 400 pounds. We'd worked in school functions, we'd worked in church functions, we were 4-H leaders together, and I had talked about that woman unmercifully. In fact, it got to where I had to go out of my way to go to town so I wouldn't pass her house. I felt so guilty. So anyway, I made an appointment. I met with her at down at the First Baptist Church. They had a life center there, and it was had a little quiet restaurant. We met down there. It's kind of fitting for compulsive overeaters, but nevertheless. And so I started to tell her while we were meeting, and she said, well, wait a minute, Tennie, before you do. She said, I'm so glad you called me, and I would like to say something to you. And what she did is she made amends to me. She had no 12-step program, but she had guilt from the gossip that things that she had said about me. So we became dear friends after that, and we sat there the time we left. We were laughing because we'd both done the same thing and felt the guilt of it. And I'm sad to say she died of obesity. And anyway, so as you go to make amends, you go one at a time. You talk to your sponsor about it. A lot of times we just want to get that off of us, that burden off of us, that we just want to, a clean slate. See, it's all about us. And we have to be very careful in doing that 9th step. And it includes legal, it includes families, it includes, the list is numerous. And we are tricky people. By the time I did that first one, now I wasn't in OA then, I was in Al-Anon, but I'd lost over 100 pounds 5 different times and would gain it back. And I had lost 100 pounds. Had found my voice, was feeling good about myself, thought I was kind of cute. The oil business was good. My husband had bought me a white cashmere coat. Of course, I picked it out. I would not have let him pick it out. But anyway, a white cashmere, beautiful coat with the white fox collars back when we were wearing those fox collars. And like I said, the oil business was good. He bought me a white Lincoln Continental. I thought I was something else. And I did not bother to tell my sponsor the detail that I'd gone in. But anyway, what I started doing, I started looking for my first husband. Now keep in mind, he deserted my baby and myself, never paid child support. He was not a nice man. He was awful. And so what I did is I made it my job to find him. And I found him, and this was before internet. I had to go to great strides to find him. I had to, look up, find people, his kinfolks and all that. But anyway, I found him in Oklahoma. And so I made a plan, and I had an aunt still in Oklahoma, so I had this big plan that I was going to go up there and tell my husband I was going to see Aunt Lily, but what I was going to do is go see this man to make amends to him. Now, my plan was that I wanted him to see what he was missing. I wanted him to see me in that white cashmere coat. I wanted him to see me driving that white Lincoln Continental. I wanted him to see that diamond ring on my finger. You know, what that was self-centered driven. I just wanted to show him, look what you missed. And so when I didn't go into that detailed with my sponsor, but she was smart and she said, what's your motive? What is your motive of going to see this man that deserted you and your son and has never paid a penny of child support? What is your motive? What do you need? You know, you were 18 years old. Do you need to make amends to him for? She was smart. She caught on. She said, I know why you want to go see him. And, you know, one of the reasons he didn't want to continue the marriage is because I was overweight and I was gaining more weight. And I want him to see what he was missing. So you must have a good sponsor to guide you in these. Don't go off on your own esteem. You know, have a good sponsor that is a godly sponsor that will pray over those amends. And we did. And she said, Tennie, you go and make that amends. You find you another sponsor. Okay, and so she said, let's just put that name right here on this future list. That'll be over here in the future. And if, you know, he's ever put back in your life, you might, you know, but let's put it way over here in the future. So you have to have a sponsor that can guide you through those lists and making amends. And, you know, because sometimes we can get very foolish with them. And I've worked with a lot of different people through the years, a lot of different criminals, and so the key is you get willing to make amends. I worked with a woman that was very wealthy, was a stand up in her community, but she hadn't always been. She'd come from the wrong side of the tracks. Anyway, I won't go into all of that. She has passed away. I'm not talking about anything anyway. But what had happened is she wanted to find home early when she was getting in recovery and she didn't have the money. Long story short, she burned her house down, took the insurance money and built her a fine home. And the guilt of that caused her to not be able to even enjoy that home. It didn't completely build that fine home, but it made a really nice down payment. And so in making those amends, all right, so does she go to the insurance company? Does she come clean? Does she get arrested for arson? You know, how would you guide a person like that? Here she is doing so much for a community. She went to school, she got a degree, she was, a physician, she helped a lot of people, sponsored a lot of people. So what would you advise that person to do? Turn herself in? That was that was an option. And what we came up with, what I recommended to her, is that she lived in a small town, and I said, why don't you make anonymous donations, big donations, not any little bitty thing, and I want to see the canceled check. I said, make donations to that volunteer fire department. Don't send a check. And we would work on how to get the money to them, so she could do it anonymously. Because by this time, she loved high society and she loved people looking up to her. And I said, you're going to have to get off of that throne and, and look at these things underneath. Because she had been a very bad alcoholic, but she recovered, went back to school, all of that. So anyway, if you are a sponsor, be very, enlist the aid of God to how to help people. And, and I could not see, and I talked to my sponsor about it, and I could not see the benefit in her going and turning herself in and facing jail time. So that's one way to make amends. And she put a lot of money into that little volunteer fire department in that town, many states away. So it's make direct amends and wherever possible. And there'll be times that you can't find the person. I want to give you this example, and then I'm going to turn it over to y'all. But there's one example that there was a girl that we were 15 years old, and I did not run around with people. I ran around with my mother. I stayed home with my mother. But there was this little group of girls that I'd worked with at the theater, and one night, I didn't know what it was like to ride around with kids, but anyway, we were, and I can't even tell you all of it. I was so jealous of this one girl. She was a cheerleader. She was cute, precious, and darling. I already weighed 213 pounds. I was 15 years old, hated myself, and I hated her because she was cute. She was everything I wanted to be. And there again, I gossiped about her. I gossiped about her big time. I'd even make up stories about her. I wasn't a very nice person, but anyway, she was on my list to make amends. I had no idea where she was. I didn't know how to get a hold of her, but she was on my list, and it was that wherever possible. Okay, fast forward many years. Husband was in AA, I was in Al-Anon, and we, as a couple, there was a big Saturday night meeting at our local club here. There'd be like 200 people there, 150, 200 people there every Saturday night, and so we took our turn as being but hosting these speakers when they would come to town. There'd be speakers coming to town, and we had a month of hosting them or something, I don't remember. But anyway, so we had this one that we were to host, and y'all are probably ahead of me on this, but anyway, we went to the hotel to pick up the woman that was going to speak, and guess what? It was the lady that was on my list that I did not have any idea how to get a hold of her. We sat in the back seat, and the guy that was the other speaker sat up front with my husband, and we were going to dinner. She recognized me, I recognized her, and I said, oh my gosh, I cannot believe. So I proceeded to make, and she touched my hand, kind of like the other woman. She said, wait, I want to make amends to you. No, I'm first. No, I'm first. We made amends to each other. She had talked about me, run me down and my family and all. Anyway, so by the time she got to get up to speak that night, she said, I'm changing my entire talk, and I'm going to talk about steps 8 and 9. And so that's the miracle of the program. That is the miracle of the program. I had carried that burden since I was 15 years old about that girl that I had just slandered. Well, I didn't know she was out slandering me too. So one of the things that you're going to find if you get in a 12-step program and you start doing these steps, one of the things you're going to find is you're going to have fun. There's going to be fun to be had. It won't all be fun, but if you're willing to do the footwork, you're going to find blessings beyond compare. So on step 9, another thing I want to say about step 9, it's the only step that you work and you can go on and work 10, 11, and 12. Other steps, you work one at a time. You work 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. When you come to 9, it may take you years to complete that list. People will show up in your life. You get willing to make amends. And however you and your sponsor figure that out, maybe write letters, make appointments, go see them. However, it's the willingness that's the key. And like I said, sometimes that had been years. When I made amends to that lady, it had been years since I had done that first inventory, and she showed up on my amends list. And so it is wherever possible. And so when you start doing your if you have a wise sponsor, they're going to work through those. They're not going to hold you up a whole lot. But if you just want to hurry through those amends so you'll feel better, they'll pull you up and probably won't let you do them all at one time, because you go to your sponsor, you look at that name, you pray for that person, and you ask God's willingness, and you get up off your knees and off your rear end, and you go make amends. But don't do it by yourself. This program is not a help yourself program. It's God, ourselves, and at least one other person. That's how you do the 9th step. So I've got some people here, and in the 9th step in the big book, it says, and I have this written in our conference room, really big, so when people are standing in the cafeteria line and get to see it, while they're standing there waiting, they get to read this. And this comes out of step 9, out of the big book. It says, our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. That's on page 77 in the big book. That is our real purpose, is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. If we're carrying around guilt and burdens of our past, that's what's going to get into between us and working with other people. And God, we can't remove those things ourselves, but God can and will if we will let Him. So that's what I have. I've got some people here that know a lot about the steps and work at 8 and 9. So who wants to start and share your experience, strength, and hope about working steps 8 and 9?